Molly O'Neill. I'm the author of One Big Table, a portrait of American cooking. And for the last decade, I've been traveling around the country investigating reports that Americans do not cook anymore.
Should I make us a dinner reservation, or you give me your exact address? Boil them, okay. Do you need to get that other line?
These are serious allegations, and I'm pleased to report that the rumors are greatly exaggerated.
Okay, I know it's weird, huh?
We caught all we could catch. That's how we were born and brought up. And if we had more daylight, we'd stay there, okay?
Yeah.
That's the thing. Only take so many from the bottom each day.
So then you had this epiphany about 15 years ago that you had to change the definition of a good fisherman.
When I saw the things declining and the things shutting down, I knew that we had to do something.
Yeah.
But we're going to try to talk to the fishermen and see what they could get along with and how many nets, whatever.
What do you think America loses if we lose our native fisheries?
This country, it needs more people like us. Hand workers, all right? Not just head workers.
How many times do you make chowder, for benefits and things now?
6 or 8 times a year.
Boy, oh boy, Dick. What, do you like the tail or the claw better? I guess that's the eternal debate, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, Molly.
What?
Nothing.
What did you say?
Yes.
You've always been a tail man? Is that what you
Well,
said?
more or less.
Oh my heavens. This is amazing. Wow. Oh yeah, she's got bread in there.
And she's out on her tractor.
Turning the hay.
I didn't start farming here until 3 years ago. I was a bronze sculptor and, chasing down the fancy galleries, and suddenly I just thought, oh my God, I just want to do something that's sincere, that doesn't have to have an exclamation point at the end of it. I just want to be a good person and do something. So there was a cow. I thought, oh yeah, I could do that. So. Okay, here's some cheese and some chutney. Julia Child was my idol, and I got Julia's mastering out of their little local library there in Northern California, and just went over that 30-page French bread method over and over and over again until I got it. So, Julia, great lady.
I lived in Cambridge, right across the street from her house, the house I was living in. And I worked in an Italian restaurant. And that was very difficult for her to understand why anybody would want to work in an Italian restaurant. But she came, she loved the food, she brought these famous chefs back. She was all about generosity. And
I think that's the basis of food. I'm sure that there's a link between gratitude and nutrition. It's we're racing off to the, little Kimberly's piano lesson or whatever that, people do now and don't spend time cooking, So, tell me more about what you do.
I'm interested in people. I mean, I know about cooking and I'm fascinated by people's cooking, but I'm really fascinated by their lives. And why have they made the choices they make, and how does food fit into that?
Yeah.
Why do you cook bread? Why do you make cheese? Why did you think of chutney? To me, that begins to show the spirit of individuality, and food is one of the last places that Americans do exert personal choice. Hi, I'm Molly.
Hi, how do you do?
Good to meet you.
Careful, careful, careful.
Look at what do you have here? Holy smoke, Ellie.
My whole house is a Jane Bay. Well, it is. This is Emmer, and this is einkorn. And this is the variety of wheat that was eaten in ancient Mesopotamia.
Oh my God, how did you get that?
I collected it in the Golan Heights from Druze Arabs. I do a lot of collecting, field work. Put it in hand. It's so delicate and so rich in flavor, and it's not toxic to gluten-sensitive people. So people that are celiacs, and every other person you talk to today says, oh, wheat, I'm allergic to that.
Right.
Because wheat has been overbred, and it's been bred to be, to stand amidst the chemicals. But mostly I'm just growing out what's been lost.
How many are you planting here?
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds.
When did you start restoring the local wheat to the Pioneer River Valley?
Well, it's really, we started talking about it and urging and meeting about it 3 years ago, but you know what? This is it.
Oh, wow, it takes 3 years to get it.
So this is actually, today we're baking bread, 3 different kinds of flatbread with 3 different kinds of local wheat.
What did you do before you became a bread maniac?
I was actually a songwriter. Yeah. And a dad, stay-at-home dad.
Did you cook at home?
I opened up the Telsahara bread book, put the kit on the counter, and made it. So, it was just...
But you can buy bread. Why did you decide to bake bread?
Well, when you're a stay-at-home mom or dad, you gotta have stuff to do. It's a practice. It's a discipline.
You know your water's here. Let's have a brief refresher course in the location of water. Okay, remember? Here, this is your good health food. Now come on, honey.
I want junk food. I don't like this healthy stuff.
What distinguishes one bean-hole dinner from the next? Is it the hole or the bean?
It's the guy cooking them.
Of course it is.
There's so many variables. Everyone's got their own little thing they do, and everyone has everything they show everyone, and then there's something else maybe they do that nobody knows about.
Now for you, what is that?
Well, I can't say.
You sure?
It's secret. This is the pork and cabbage.
That is gorgeous, Maynard.
I think we're ready. Maynard's ready to serve.
Maynard!
Ready to eat.
Oh, sorry, Maynard. What is this? Pork?
That's pork loin and a lot of cabbage and onions.
Oh God, what a great idea. Where did you learn how to make this?
I don't know.
You don't know?
It just developed.
So you're using
Ain't it pretty?
Look at there.
I'll take a knife, peel that off. Them hogs love that. Let's go, Homer.
We get bored in the winter, so we decided to have a competition or a crump off. The crumpets are about this round, and they're meant to have holes in the top. So we're going to see anyway.
So what did you use
My
for
mood
the
normally
molds?
takes a major nosedive if they come out wrong. So if you've got anything sort of fun to say, this is the moment.
Oh, okay.
So
3 cups of plain white flour, sifted together with 1.5 teaspoons of salt.
did you ever think of owning a restaurant, Molly?
I did that, yeah.
Oh, you actually had a restaurant?
I did.
And how was it?
Yeah, I once owned a women's restaurant that served nonviolent cuisine.
You serious?
I'm totally serious.
So,
Yeah,
amazing.
it was hilarious. The Common Woman Club.
is it all women in there?
Absolutely. Male dogs weren't allowed.
Ah.
Remember that?
This is like a very bad cooking show. Confidence is the name of the game, right?
Well, that seems to be something you're not sure you have.
No, you got
You're
that
not
right.
confident
It's
of your
perceptive.
confidence.
Okay. Ooh, Christ. Why is it coming out? Okay.
Do you want to take a break? Maybe do a little meditation, a little yoga? So we've gone for 15 minutes. Did it do anything?
Yeah, no.
Okay. So preheat to heavy, we've done that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. You ready?
You ready?
What do you think?
That sort of crumpety looking.
Yeah.
Okay. This is where you sort of lose your temper, throw it around the room. Where are the holes?
They're gone.
The thing is a complete mystery as to what makes these things work.
Yeah, they're really getting going now. They're very excited.
Are you getting it? You're not going to sleep tonight.
Oh man, this is so cool.
Ever happened to me?
Solved it.
I basically got angry, heated the whole frickin' thing up.
Oh, nice.
He's a happy man.
Yeah, yeah.
You can see that, right?
Don't look like hockey pucks either.
You stay. We'll be right back.
While B is going back to the over there, I've asked Bessie to give us 2 minutes on, or 2 seconds on the film that we just saw.
Oh, yeah. So that is by Molly's friend, the filmmaker Chris Burrell. And it is just a cut of what she made, a 30-minute film, which you can find on YouTube. And to watch the whole thing is really delightful. And that was when Molly was making One Big Table and traveling around the country and looking for, all these incredible home cooks and having, hilarious adventures with her dog.
Okay. B is the chair
I
of the food.
Welcome you tonight to the Culinary, the 14th Culinary Luminary event, this time obviously in honor of Molly O'Neill. This is part of the Festival of, this event is actually part of the Festival of the New. So we're not only honoring Molly O'Neill, but we're also celebrating the 100th anniversary of the New School, founded in 1919 by a bunch of dissident scholars from Columbia University. We still house a lot of dissident scholars, and we're very proud of it, indeed. But all this week, if you go onto our website and type in the Festival of New, you will see programs day in and day out until Sunday. Our faculty, our students, guests are in here providing all sorts of wonderful information, great programming. So I recommend that you take a look at what we have to offer this year, this particular week. I'm Bee Banyu, and I'm the head of food studies here. We're sponsoring this event. I wanted to stop and tell you a little bit about our programs in food studies. We offer 3 degrees, the BA, the BS, and the AAS in food studies, in 3 specialized areas: culture, media, and communication, environmental and health, and policy and politics. We also have some courses available to continuing education students through the Open Campus. Check that out as well. This semester we have, besides this program, a lot of really interesting programs coming up, most of them bunched for some reason around the end of October. Don't know, but anyway, it should be interesting. The first actually is going to be on October 23rd at 7 p.m. over in the auditorium over at 66 West 12th. That's Rachel Ray in conversation with Kim Severson from the New York Times. This is one of the Times talks. Rachel Ray has just published a book, Rachel Ray 50. I guess we know what that might be about. In any case, she's going to have a conversation with Ms. Severson, who is actually a Pulitzer Prize winner in 2018 for her reporting on sexual harassment. And Severson has been following Rachel Ray since 2005, so it should be a really fascinating conversation. To find the tickets, all you have to do is go into Times Events, newyorktimes.com, and you'll see all the Times talks, and there are other events as well. Then, shortly following, on October 26th and 27th, that's Saturday and Sunday of that week, we have the great honor of hosting the 9th annual Black Farmers and Urban Gardeners Conference. They actually affectionately call themselves bugs, which I sort of like, right? That's Black urban growers, so bugs. This particular, they're actually interesting because they bring together people from all over the food system, from urban and rural farmers, students, chefs, food product makers, herbalists, nutritionists, consumers, policymakers, educators, activists, and organizations from across the country. This particular theme this year is really fascinating. It's called Homecoming, Remembering and Reclaiming Our Futures Through Soil and Soul. So that's actually happening at the 66 West 12th Street building on the 26th and 27th here. The 25th, they have some tours. So look on to the blackurbangrowers.org website or go into Eventbrite and look for the event there, and you'll see more of the information about what's going on. Then on the 28th, we're going to have Jonathan Safran Foer come in to talk about his new book, which is We Are the Weather, Saving the Planet Begins at Breakfast. In this particular book, he explores the central global dilemma that we're all trying to cope with, but he does it in a surprising and interestingly personal way. He is the author of 2 best-selling award-winning novels, which, frankly, I didn't know about. I knew only about his nonfiction book. The novels are Everything is Illuminated and Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close. The nonfiction book is Eating Animals. That's the one that I know best. So he's going to be in here on the 28th. Yeah, is it the 28th? Even I'm losing. Between 7 and 8:30, and that's going to be here in the University Center, right upstairs in that auditorium. And the tickets are available on Eventbrite. And last, something a little different. Holiday House is actually sponsoring an event here. And the whole idea behind it is that holiday season is sort of coming quickly. On November 14th, this is when this event is. And they are bringing together some experts to sort of help cope with the holiday malaise. So they've invited Bobby Flay. They've invited an inspirational guru by the name of Jordan Lee Dooley. They have Madeline McIntosh from Penguin Random House to talk about her favorite books from 2019, just in case you want to buy people a gift of books. And then they have a couple of beverage experts, both for the drinking and the giving of gifts. So Aldo Somm, Grant Reynolds, and the Bitters Man, Brad Thomas Parsons, will be here. You can find the tickets for that event, which is happening on November 14th, also on Eventbrite. Okay, so that's enough of that. A lot of events, all bunched together. I'm sort of looking forward to them, but maybe not. In any case, my next job is a pleasure. It's to introduce you to the moderator for this evening and the moderator for all 14 culinary luminaries, right? All 14 of them. That is Andrew F. Smith, who's a really nice guy. Andrew?
I've always been wanting to introduce in that fashion, so I thank you, B, for that. One of the reasons is very simply we have put everybody's bio down here, and rather than spend, it would be probably about 10 minutes on each of our panelists to give them the real bio, we've done the best we can to summarize their professional lives here. We have 5 panelists, not 6. Alyssa Altman emailed us this morning and said she'd been diagnosed with walking pneumonia, and I thought it would be better if she didn't come tonight. So we will look forward to her comments that she may be able to put up online. This is being filmed. It will be up online in about a week. Is that correct? about a week. We got a nod back there. So for those that were unable to attend tonight because we have limited space, we will be able to see the programs for there. We have 5 wonderful panelists, and our first speaker is Catherine Alford, a cookbook author, former Food Network executive. Catherine.
Yes, and former Molly O'Neill assistant. So it's sort of ironic for me to be here talking about Molly at the New School, because that's where I met Molly. I want to say over 30 years ago. I have the honor of sort of giving a little blurb about Molly for those of you who may or may not be familiar with her work. Molly was at its core, and if you could see in the wonderful film we saw before, just had a wonderful exuberance and curiosity. And when I was just watching her smile again and that laugh, which I think all of us who knew her, when you hear that, it was always a little bit like she had a secret on all of us. And she was wicked smart and knew how to bring out the best in everybody. And as a mentor, I felt really, really honored to have worked with her. She was from the Midwest. She would always talk very proudly about being from Columbus, Ohio. And in fact, one of the things she loved to talk about in Columbus, Ohio was where all the big CPG companies would do all their test products. And so she would always go to those tastings. And instead of just being very sort of cavalier about them, she would really tune in to tasting them. And she had that very clear and canny thing of really understanding the American palate and really wanted to explore that, both high and low. So she came from there, she went to college, she worked in, I love what her description of her feminist cafe, the Ain't No Women Cafe that served nonviolent cuisine in Northampton, Mass. in the 70s. You can just imagine what all that was like. Then she went to Cape Cod and worked in a restaurant in Provincetown in the 70s, and I can tell you you had to be really brave to do that through the winter season. And she would tell me stories of going down to the pier and getting scallops and lobsters from the lobstermen and being part of that community, which is like outermost. It's a really on the edge kind of place to be, which appealed to her personality. And then she had the lucky kismet of working with Lillian Hellman on her culinary memoir. And that was sort of the bridge where she really talked to the two sides of her brain, both as a passionate cook and someone with a voracious personality and hunger for both people and food and exuberance. Fast forward, she was named the top chef, and by Boston Magazine, which she always sort of laughed about and said, she felt really more as a writer and a cook and not a chef. Came to New York, worked at Newsday, and I met her when she was just starting at the New York Times. And that was kind of an amazing thing. It was really a change when Molly came to the Times and what she did with that column. She was very proud of the fact that she had to get Craig Claiborne's blessing in order to take over his column. And it was really a different change of the way she was writing and thinking about food for the Times, and really changed what you would see. And particularly the byline Molly O'Neill, she would have, an exuberant piece about, pasta or something on the street or street food, and then also you would see a front page article about the glycemic index and pasta is bad for you. Molly was the first one to say that, and she was curious and an amazing way of talking with people and bringing out the best in people. At the same time, she was writing for the Times, a weekly column. She was also writing this sort of small little book called the New York Cookbook. And if you have not seen this book, it's really I was working with her on this book and her Times column at the same time. And Molly had a way of talking to people and getting them to just tell their stories that was really kind of amazing. And she was fearless. And she brought that out in the people around her as well. And anyone I think and I've met a lot of people over the years and have shared the reality of I worked with Molly, and she was incredibly generous with her time and her insight and her wit and her no bullshit. She would tell you this is good, this is not bad, but she also encouraged people to do more than what they thought they could do, which was right in line with her personality. And I'm indebted to her. I was just met her in this food writing class. She threw me into her kitchen. She's like, I'm going to teach you how to be a recipe writer and how to do recipes. And before I knew it, she had connected me with the folks at Union Square, and I was writing the Union Square Cafe cookbook. I had no idea what I was doing, but Molly was like, you can do this. And that kind of support and exuberance was really wonderful. This book really is a vision of New York in a way that we think about food now as sort of like, of course, high and low and in between and street food and high end and Le Cirque and all of that. But Molly was doing this before anyone else was. I loved in her, sadly, obit, Ruth Reichel said, you know, she was doing what Tony Bourdain was doing before Tony was doing it. And she was just as comfortable at dinner at Le Cirque as she was eating out of a street cart or talking, as you see, with someone for the main pit of beans that you get out of a bean pit. And she was an incredible teacher and mentor. And in the 90s, her loft in the very West 30s on 10th Avenue was just like the perfect food salon. She brought incredibly great cooks, writers, intellectuals, people who just always knew that there was going to be a good time, good food, and good conversation. And I can say that I am indebted to her, and watching her again here reminded that Molly always believed that food was much larger than just what you had on your plate. I suggest going and reading her famous food porn article in Columbia Journal. And what she was talked about was that she was very interested, and I'm going to probably misquote it, so I better read this appropriately. In September 2003, she said, "For nearly 20 years, I tried to tease the extraordinary from the mundane, and to us the familiar, and to the familiar. That sprig of basil, that bottle of olive oil, and usher into readers that as a way of looking at social, geographic, and cultural worlds that they would not know." And she really thought food was her bridge into people's lives. And I think anyone who worked with her got that spirit, and we're very, very grateful to her. And for some reason, she always got people to say yes.
I forgot to mention that our first Culinary Luminary program was on Julia Child. I think some of you were actually there. No one wants to raise their hand. Molly O'Neill was one of the panelists, and she was actually a panelist on two of the other Culinary Luminaries, so it wasn't just a friend of all of ours, our professional friend and a personal friend, but she was also actively engaged in Culinary Luminaries. Our second panelist is Kathy Gunst, food writer, cookbook author, and radio personality.
Who has no voice tonight. I'm sorry about my voice. I want to talk about Molly as a friend. I never worked with her in a formal way. I was an editor at Food and Wine a million years ago when she was in New York, and our paths never crossed. I'm really unclear why. I first met her, I was invited to Eugene, Oregon to go to an American truffle festival. And I walked into the room, and there was this woman lying on the floor with a Lagato Romagnola, is a specific type of Italian dog that's very good at sniffing truffles. And among the weird things that happened that weekend was that people brought their dogs to Eugene, Oregon to learn to train them. And there was this woman on the floor with a dog. They were large animals, full out on her, licking her face, kissing her, and she was just talking baby love dog talk to this dog. And she looked up and she goes, "Are you Kathy?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like, "I'm Molly." And that was the beginning. She did love dogs, as do I. We really became friendly very quickly. She started something which many of you have been to. I can see some faces and maybe have heard of, and I know others are going to talk about this as well. She started this program called LongHouse up in Rensselaersville, New York, where she lived. And I always called it the most out-of-the-box food festival that ever existed. People were like, "Well, what was it?" And I'm like, "Well," and then you'd sort of pause because it was so hard to put into words. There was a red barn. there were all these people coming. It was always freezing and rainy. And there was Molly, and everything seemed so amazingly disorganized. And on one level it was, and on another level, everything came together. When I started thinking about the stories I wanted to tell tonight, I wrote down persuasive powers. Molly O'Neill, getting people to do things they might not want to do before realizing they were going to do it because Molly was asking. I learned that very quickly about her. She invited me to come to LongHouse. I think it was the first year, maybe it was the second. First, yeah. Okay. I was just gone through cancer. I can do this. And I said, I can't come. You know, I've got my last chemo. And she's like, of course you can come. Just put a goddamn scarf on your head. And I thought, I'm going to put a goddamn scarf on my head. And I'm going to show up. And she made me feel so strong. I really had a hard time seeing her up. I'm sorry. Okay. So, LongHouse. I came and talked about audio. She hired my husband John and I to come teach her fellows about audio. I do radio, he does radio training. And I was so amazed at walking into her house in Rensselaerville for the first time. There were just bodies everywhere. There was like a dorm on the second floor of her house. All the fellows slept in this giant room because it was 90% women. Hello. And she was like a mama hen. Like she opened her heart, her mind, her kitchen, her house, and she taught people everything that she could. She was such a good teacher. Being there with her and the fellows, I was really just so impressed at how open she was to sharing everything she knew. The next year at LongHouse, under the title of Persuasive Powers, she said, Kathy, I need you to come. You're going to have a big part in this. I said, great. What do you want me to do? I'll let you know. A week before, Molly, what do you want me to do? I'll let you know. The night before, there was a dinner. Everybody's there. I went up to her. I'm like, hey, do you still want me to do something? Oh, yeah. I'll tell you after dinner. So now it's Friday night. It's 10 p.m. And she says, and I'm like, Molly, I'm going to go to bed. Did you decide yet what you want me to do at 8:30 tomorrow morning? And she's like, yeah. You're going to interview Jonathan Gold in front of a live audience. And I'm like, what? Jonathan Gold? And she said, yeah. And I'm like, Molly, I have not read all his stuff. I need to do my homework. She's like, you'll be fine. And that we were staying at a kind of crappy motel in the middle of nowhere up there. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to stay up all night. I'm going to read everything Jonathan Gold has ever written. I'm going to get it together. I'm going to interview him. I'm going to be good. We get back to the hotel. I say goodnight to my husband. I turn on my computer. No Wi-Fi. So I laid there all night thinking, what am I going to do? I'm not going to do it. You know, back and forth. And I just kept hearing, Molly, you can do this. You can do this. Showed up the next morning and I was like, Molly, there was no Wi-Fi. Oh yeah, there's no Wi-Fi up here. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, could you tell me a little bit about Jonathan Gold? She goes, all you need to know is he's the only food writer to ever win the Pulitzer Prize. Okay, now I'm going to interview a Pulitzer Prize winner, and I have no information. And what happened was I had a conversation with him. I interview people on the radio. I know how to do it, but it was Jonathan Gold. And I just sat down and looked at him, and I thought, I'm going to talk to him and ask him what anybody would ask him. What is your life like? Ask him about criticism in LA and all the neighborhoods he goes to and the people he meets. And we had a kind of lovely conversation. And at the end, Molly came up and said, oh, it was perfect. But the most miraculous thing was Jonathan Gold came up to me afterwards and said, you really know your stuff. And whenever I teach young journalists, I tell them this story and I say, the moral of the story is not don't do your homework, but the moral of the story is to stay present and listen. And she provided me, even though she didn't mean to, kind of permission. This was what it was like with Molly. You just had to roll with it. If you thought being organized and in control and doing your homework was going to get you through with Molly, bullshit. You just had to ride the waves with her. And I'll leave you with one last story. I guess it's 2 years ago now, I reached out to her. I had followed her health issues, and I said, Molly, I'm writing a memoir about, I'm third generation person with cancer in my family and the only survivor, and I'm working on a memoir, and I see that you're working on a memoir. I'd love to talk to you. And we wrote a bunch of emails back and forth, and I just wanted to share something she wrote. She said, I'm writing a memoir called Liver, A Love Story. It scares the living crap out of me, but it's time to get my head out of the refrigerator or oven. I'm interested in effects of energy medicine modalities on cancer, doing lots of Reiki and even some weirder faith-based stuff. I write daily in terror of losing credibility while saving my life. And we wrote back and forth, and then she wrote to me, before we were about to meet, she said, it's called Liver, A Love Story. The science of inherited or transferred liver is in its infancy. I am 1 part male hillbilly with altered taste, personality traits to prove it, and no one in my liver transplant support network, no transplant survivor, does not experience this. So she wrote to me, I was coming to New York, and she said, will you meet me in Midtown? And I was like, oh, seriously, Midtown? And she said, I want latkes. It was the holidays, it was right near Hanukkah, and there was a major blizzard coming. She had had her liver transplant, I hadn't seen her, and I said, sure. So we met at the restaurant on top of Barney's. That's where we had to go. She had to have the latkes, she had to have the applesauce, she had to have the horseradish. Fine, I'll meet you. And there's a little waiting area outside the restaurant, and I was waiting for her, and I turned around, and I caught this woman out of the corner of my eye, and she was thin, and she had on a pencil-lined skirt and an ironed shirt, and she had a little French silk handkerchief around her neck, and lovely little pearl earrings, and then I turned away, and I was like, oh my God, it's Molly. But it wasn't Molly, but it was Molly, and we hugged, and we had lunch, and we talked a lot about all of this, but she talked about her strong belief that the young man whose liver the transplant she was given was inside of her, and she started to describe different foods she liked that she had always hated, foods she hated that she loved. She talked about her sexual appetite. She talked about colors and fashion, because the way she was dressed, I had never seen anything like this on her. And it was like meeting a brand new person and embracing this beautiful old friend of mine. And that was the last time I saw her.
Our third panelist, if can you handle going after that?
Yeah.
Our third panelist is Carolyn Fauché, poet and professor at Georgetown University.
Oh, I thought I would. Okay. Well, I'm a poet, but my second love all my life was cooking, and I learned starting at the age of 6 at the side of my 19th century grandmother from the Tatra Mountains of Slovakia. And so I cooked all my childhood, all my adulthood, my teenage years. Everywhere I went, I would apprentice myself to someone in a kitchen and try to learn things. But that was all a secret because my life was as a poet. And in this secret life, I discovered Molly O'Neill and her food columns in the New York Times. So I had 2 reasons to buy the Sunday Times. I wasn't living in New York, and I would go find the Sunday Times to pull out the magazine section, turn to the back, rip out Molly's page, and also read the book review. So Molly, through this page, taught me to make spaghetti carbonara, lemon curd, apple cake, beef broth, chocolate biscotti, roast peppers, lobster chowder, Tennessee corn and truffle flan, and hot and sour soup. I idolized her. I would go get the ingredients on Monday, and sometime during the week, my husband would say, "What did Molly write about this week? What are we having?" So one day, a mutual friend said, "Molly O'Neill would like to get in touch with you. She'd like to call you." And I said, "Molly O'Neill?" And she said, "Yes, the food writer, the cook, I said, "I can't talk to Molly O'Neill." And she said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, that would be like talking to Meryl Streep or something. I can't do it." Because she was like, a star to me. She was the distant goddess of food writing in the New York Times. And so I was curious, what does Molly O'Neill want to talk to a poet about? Well, she had found out from my friend that I was making a chocolate milkshake that was thick and creamy and wonderful and had no dairy in it and almost no calories. Molly wanted to make this milkshake. Both of us were sort of interested in managing our chocolate milkshake addiction along with our desire to be healthy. And so with great trepidation, we talked on the phone for the first time, and I told her how I made it. You have to have a banana that has to be really ripe and chop it up and put it in the freezer, and it has to be really stone frozen when you use it. And you put it in the Vitamix with almond milk and cocoa powder, and you make this thing. Well, Molly was enchanted, and she started making it. And she, of course, being Molly, started adding avocados to it and making green drinks. And then she wrote me an email. She said, "I'm trying to reach you. The first is to discuss the wonders of green shakes. I'm addicted, and you are responsible. There is not yet a green shake rehab, but even if there were, I'd not be interested. I'm far too interested in the interplay of avocado and cacao." So, I didn't know that Molly was a poet before she was a food writer. I didn't know that she'd read my poetry and read the poetry of a lot of other people and was actually interested in our little subculture. But she was. And she asked me to come to LongHouse the year that she was showcasing saffron and the spice trail. And there I was in the midst of all of these incredible food people. It was like they were all there. And it was a mess, and it was wonderful, and it did all come together, just as you said. There's a bonfire, and someone's barbecuing, and someone else is trying to make things in the kitchen, and all of these food heroes are walking around. And she's bringing potters in there, and she's even arranged for the people who make the bowls and the dishes that food is served on to be there and be showcased. And I didn't know what I was doing there. And she said, "I just want you to read poetry. Read poetry because the food people need to hear poetry." I thought she was out of her mind. And I didn't know what to do. I said, "Molly, I haven't written any poetry about food. I have my grandmother making bread in a poem." And she said, no, not about food. Just read them a poem. I want you to read them a poem. So with great trepidation, I got up and read a poem. Before I do that, I want to say that I really thought that Molly brought a kind of poet's sensibility to her food writing. Her food writing was graceful and beautiful, and just to give you a couple of examples, she had a piece called De Gustibus, "If the bread is getting better, can the city be far behind?" Some of you may know this piece. Mr. Ohrwasher never let his starter stop bubbling, never let the fire die down in his oven. Baking bread is his life. He began developing his instinct at the age of 7, when with the aid of a cream cheese crate, he could reach the kneading bench in the basement of the family's bakery. He learned to bank the oven's fire, to know its hot and cold spots, and the hisses of steam that make the bread crust form slowly in the floury hot world beneath the sidewalk on East 78th Street. he learned to mind the vat of fermenting water, sugar, and flour that had been used to leaven the bread before commercial yeast was reliable. She then decided that we were going to teach writing together in Alaska. We were going to do this at Tutka Bay, and we were going to have a workshop, and it will all work out. It will just be fine. I said, what are we going to teach? Writing. And we're going to have a group, and we're going to have demonstrations of different kinds of foods. And by the way, we're going kayaking with sea lions. And Kathy was there with us once, and she went out and actually went and visited and had a lot of fun with some grizzly bears, right? She's very brave. Anyway, I saw her take off in this little seaplane to go see the grizzly bears, and I thought, that is too cool for words. So I agreed to go and teach with her, and I confessed to her that I wanted to write a memoir called The Poet in the Kitchen. And probably it wouldn't have very many recipes, but it would be my adventures in the world apprenticing myself to people whose language I didn't speak, usually. And they would teach me to make something, and I would just learn by watching them and go write it all down. And I said, but I don't know anything really about food. I'm not trained. I don't know the chemistry of food. I don't know all the things that go into it. I don't know how to develop recipes or test them. I'm just an intuitive kitchen cook. And she said, don't be ridiculous. You're going to be writing this memoir called The Poet in the Kitchen. Of course you can do it. Just sit down and start doing it. And then send it to me and I'll help you. So this is what she was, and this is how encouraging she was. She made me believe I could do that I could do anything, actually, even read a poem to foodies at LongHouse in a chaotic kind of carnival festival over a weekend in Rensselaerville, New York. It was just as described. So for Molly, I'm going to close my piece with a little poem. And Betsy and I think it's a good poem to read for her, but it's, in light of this, it's a little bit sad. Molly and I both liked lighthouses. And there's a lighthouse in Ireland called Hook. It's on a rocky coast. It's across the water from a lighthouse called Crook. So you can put this together. All of these sayings have origins. And this is a poem that includes the history of lighthouses, because she was kind of a lighthouse, you know. She had a great desire for solitude. When we were in Alaska, I would see her staring out at the water for long periods of time, just thinking. And then when she was with us, she kind of lit up and poured her heart out and inspired all of us, and then she'd be quiet again. And that's what lighthouses do in the day and the night. The Light Keeper. A night without ships, foghorns calling into walled cloud, and you, still alive, drawn to the light, as if it were a fire kept by monks. Darkness once crusted with stars, but now death dark as you sail inward. Through wild gorse and sea wrack, through heather and torn wool you ran, pulling me by the hand so I might see this for once in my life. The spin and spin of light, the whirring of it, light in search of the lost. There, since the era of fire, era of candles and hollow wick lamps, whale oil and solid wick, colza and lard, kerosene and carbide, the signal fires lighted on this perilous coast in the Tower of Hook. You say to me, stay awake. Be like the lens maker who died with his lungs full of glass. Be the yew in blossom when bees swarm. Be their amber cathedral, and even the ghosts of Cistercians will be kind to you. In a certain light, as after rain, in pearled clouds or the water beyond, seen or sensed water, sea or lake, you would stop still and gaze out for a long time. Also when fireflies opened and closed in the pines, and a star appeared, our only heaven, you taught me to live like this, that after death, it would be as it was before we were born. Nothing to be afraid, nothing but happiness, as unbearable as the dread from which it comes. Go toward the light always. Be without ships. Okay, thank you.
Our fourth panelist is Amy Halloran. Excuse me, writer and agent.
Change agent. Don't come to me for any other things. I don't have them. I came to Mali as a student. I have always been a writer, and it was fiction until I started to run a farmer's market, and I realized that I knew nothing about how we got food, and I needed to figure out how to tell everybody about it. So after I finished running the Troy Waterfront Farmers Market, which just got the award, the People's Choice Award, I started to write the stories of the people who were making the food at the market and in and around upstate New York. And I kept on going with this kind of thing and poking around, trying to figure out what kind of book I was going to write. I was a do-it-yourself, kind of urban homesteader, so I thought I was going to write about locavores and would this wave of back to the land stuff last. And I believe it was through a Facebook ad that I found Molly's Cooknscribble, which was another version of LongHouse, and it was a way to that we could learn how to write. And even though I was in Troy, which was very close to Rensselaerville, although psychically miles apart, it was a telephone class, and there were people from around the world, and it was a really interesting way to learn. And Molly would have us write and then share our stuff with her and each other, I believe. I got to be a bit of a teacher's pet in our class, and I sure took to that, didn't mind it one bit. And she really helped me discover that I could, while I could be interested in everything, I had to narrow my focus. At the first time I was writing about the history of Aunt Jemima pancake mix at the World's Fair, and I was doing a really extensive thing, and she taught me to rein it in and figure out that what I really wanted to write about was the pancakes and Aunt Jemima and the history of flour. So I have Molly to thank for her way of letting me chaotically discover myself. As I was coming here, I thought that the chaos of Molly that I experienced was really just my approach to life, because I never ask questions, I just say yes, and that landed me. I didn't realize that this was perfect match for Molly, but so after my book came out, Molly invited me to be a part of LongHouse on the other side. And so one day, while you were interviewing Jonathan Gold, I was making pancakes. I thought I was making breakfast for everybody. So I just brought, a lot of really good flour. And then all of a sudden I got hit with thunder and lightning, because I was an interview subject, and Betsy and Jean Barron were interviewing me, and there were lights. It was crazy, and I was just making pancakes and talking about my love of flour and how to make a really good pancake and why flour matters. And I kept on getting myself I was in Miami. I went to what was that in Miami that we did? I have no idea about it. I mean, I don't even really believe Miami still exists, but I was taken there, and I had to sleep in a bunk under Molly in this bizarre place. And again, I was making pancakes and talking about it for another set of people, and it was a really great experience. And I think we did it again in LA. And I never knew what I was getting into, and I think that's a common thread, that with her warmth and permission, she let you figure out your own best self. And for writing, that was really important. I always had a permission slip to be a writer. I never doubted that, but I never thought I'd write a book about flour, and Molly really helped me find that.
Our final panelist is Betsy Andrews, food writer, poet, and LongHouse instructor.
So I want to say that when Molly died, I really felt like I needed to see her again. So I went on the internet and started looking for videos of her and photographs of her, and I found this video is on YouTube, but I also found these panels, the Culinary Luminaries panels, and Molly talking on these panels. And so I want to thank you, Andy, because I emailed Andy and said, well, we really should do this for Molly. And Andy was like, yes, we should do this for Molly. So it feels really full circle for me, because watching her on the panels and seeing how lucidly she spoke about Julia Child, who she knew quite well, and Clementine Paddleford and other folks, and how entertaining she was when she spoke. I mean, it's just really, I think, beautiful. So thank you, New School, to be doing this for her. I was an editor at Saveur, and I left in 2014. I knew her. She wrote for us at Saveur, but I didn't really know Molly personally at that point. But she contacted me, of course, because this is really Molly. She's like, aha, here's a person who can do things with me. So she contacted me in 2014, and then to sort of pull me into this wacky omnibus enterprise that she had going on up in Rensselaerville, where her house was, and it included a website, an online writing school, and also over the phone. She sort of did these phone sessions with students, an immersive summer writing residency, a small press, and this food festival. I was reluctant. I had a lot going on, but I also didn't really quite get what she was doing. I didn't quite understand what she was up to. And I think Molly oftentimes didn't really know what she was up to. But one thing she really was doing was community building. And so she pulled me into this community. I did this live reporting, demo at the festival with my partner Jean and with Penny De Los Santos, the photographer, and Kitchen's Sarah Kate Gillingham. I taught narrative structure to her summer students. I pinch hit for her in her online class, and when Molly got too sick, I stood in for her as facilitator of a writing residency that she had organized at Julia Child's house in Provence. I started working for her by editing this quartet of books about the Midwest for her small press. We never finished those books. 2 of them got totally finished. The third one, I could not get her to write the forewords. It was so hard to get her to focus on writing the forewords. That didn't get finished. And then the 4th book was actually uneditable, and the writer was not available, and I frankly wasn't getting paid enough money to finish it. So this was a project that Molly and I failed together on. But it did not wreck our friendship, which was this beautiful thing, because I was completely charmed by this, I was just coming out of working for corporate media, where it's all about, profit and stuff. And I was totally charmed by this wackadoo thing she had going on, that was, both confounding and incredibly compelling. I remember talking to her about this, like, wow, like, just like, I just come from this place where like all you cared about was like profit. And she said to me, well, this is supposed to be profitable. I was like, oh, okay. Well, she meant to make money. But what drove that endeavor was not this, this profit motive. What drove that endeavor was her incredible creative ambition. She was peripatetic and she was omnivorous. She went all over New York City for her column and for this book, and she had a PBS show called Molly O'Neill's New York, a taste of the city, where she just sort of went all over the city as well, eating things and sort of discovering things that now we think of as like kind of hipster foodie rites of passage, right? Like the Latinx food stalls at the Red Hook ball fields, the movable feast of the 7 train, the incredible diversity of cuisines on the far west side in Hell's Kitchen, Donut Plant. She discovered it all, and she really brought forth this culinary diversity of New York. She called it not the melting pot, but the spice rack of New York that was not being paid attention to at that time. And then she did the same thing, out there in the country with this book, One Big Table, right? This is really like is my experience of Molly and of this book. I'm just going to quote her. Irene Sachs, writing for Weight Watchers about this book, said, "I went looking for something to do with pork chops, and I came up for air an hour later, having read about the history of toasters, the uses of dried apples, the invention of 7-Up, and how to make potato chip cookies." That was Molly. She ate everything, and she was interested in everybody. And she, did all of it for like the love of food, yes, but the love of people and a great story. She said, and she says it here in this, I think in this film, that, I'm interested, I'm fascinated by people's cooking, but I'm really fascinated by their lives. And she was as fascinated by the lives of her subjects as she was the lives of her students. She really focused on nurturing aspiring writers. She was interested in the narrative of their lives. She encouraged them to tell that story from a place of emotional honesty that only they could tell. I'm just going to mention some of the people: Amanda Balaguer, Hallie Ramadine, Ellen Gray, Kristen Stengel, Fen Fenton, Amy White, Mackenzie Smith, Remy Roberts, Alicia Walter. Some of my fellow panelists and people in the audience here today are all working in food writing now today because of what they got from Molly and the encouragement they got from Molly. She helped people to realize their potential, and she did it by paying attention to people. And as a writer, she was one of the keenest observers of human nature that I think the food world has had. That makes sense because she did start as a poet, and her writing was incredibly poetic. And she understood, I'm a poet. I spent, I'm thanking her in memoriam in my book that I just finished, because I started it at her house in Rensselaerville. When I used to say to food writers, when food writers would say to me, "Well, where's your book? Now that you left Severe, where's your book?" I'd say to them, "I already have a couple of books, but they don't know from poetry." To them, they're looking for a cookbook. She understood what I was doing. And I would sit up there in that weird Victorian girls' dorm in the attic and write. The view of the finches on the plastic feeder of her at her neighbor's house starts off my book. And we would leave each other alone because she did need solitude and she was writing. We would communicate by text, and every so often she would send me a poem that she had just written. And then we'd get together for dinner. So there's a lot of poetry in her language, and I just want to read a paragraph from really my favorite piece of writing of hers. It's called Rare Breed, and it was published in Severe in 2009, right before I started working there. And it's a portrait of a guy named Frank Reese, who is a Kansas breeder of heritage turkeys. And he was so made for his vocation that Molly tells us that as a first grader, he wrote a sonnet called Me and My Turkeys. And she visits him at home, and here's what she says. The house is well tended. Reese restored the white pine woodwork and ordered burgundy-colored Victorian-style wallpaper from the designer wallpaper company Bradford & Bradford for the dining room and sitting room. But the scent of diesel fuel and chicken coop and turkey coop from Reese's work clothes laces the air. Feed catalogs, fan letters, tax forms, utility bills, and photographs of turkeys are arranged in neat piles on the dining room table. I'd spent the day visiting the farm with Reese, and he'd invited me in from the cold. The house was utterly quiet, but for the sound of the farmer rifling through the papers on the table. Finally, finding what he was after, he waved a black and white portrait of a handsome bronze turkey. Charlie, he exclaimed. Out of 1,000 turkeys, Reese said, there's always one who wants to be with you all the time. Charlie was my first. Molly taught her students to carry both a tape recorder for interviews and a notebook for observations, and you can see why in that passage, right? I mean, it's just really exquisitely wrought details. There's the syntax of his voice. There's the idiosyncratic, things about him, and all this humor and sort of pathos and sadness and passion. It all expresses this guy's humanity. And really, that's what she was about in her writing, and you combine that sort of poetry with this narrative arc that is about saving heritage turkeys from extinction, and you have this kind of masterpiece of food writing, And so I have always taught this piece to my students because I think it's kind of perfect. It also has a lot of humor in it, and that makes sense because Molly was really funny. She was big. She said of America, heck, it's a big country with a big appetite. Molly was a big woman with a big appetite. She also had a really big laugh, and she laughed loudly and a lot. And in her writing, you see that. So I just want to share one little snippet from the New York Times, which sort of expresses the humor and like the weirdness and sort of foibles of humanity. This is a piece from 1992. It's called, New York invites delegates to make themselves at home. The Democratic National Convention was in New York, and somehow, I don't know how this happened, but the Democratic Party got all of these famous people to go to lunch with the delegates from, Iowa. There's Carol Channing is in this story, and Diane Brill and Dr. Ruth Westheimer, and so she says at one point, Louis Rudin, the developer, invited the Kansas delegates to his East Side home for cocktails. After a good laugh at how people from Kansas City, Missouri had, by an act of New York logic, been included on the guest list, the denizens from the land of Dorothy and Toto settled into Mr. Rudin's glassed terrace like a flock of birds in somebody's backyard. In fact, when the host and former mayor John V. Lindsay left for another engagement several hours later, the Kansas delegates just waved goodbye and sat, until after sunset. We got to feeling real cozy, said one delegate. Her humor also was, I think, a really profound tool that she used when she was battling her illness. When she was going through chemo, I still have them on my phone. She would text me messages with photos of her, what she called her, chemo troll hair, these funny photos of her. And because she had found out a lot about her donor, she wasn't supposed to know much about her donor, but she knew a lot about her liver donor. She called her liver Pork Chop because the guy's nickname was Pork Chop. And as Kathy says, Pork Chop became a sort of an alter ego inside her. And that alter ego was really randy and really hungry for the world. Almost even hungrier than Molly O'Neill. if that is even possible.
I have a few impossible questions. So, question number one: in a few words, what would you identify as Molly's most important strength? Second question.
No. It's, I think we've all said it. Is that she was not self-conscious about just doing it. I mean, she was her confidence, and even and I totally appreciate what people saying of like that lighthouse, the quietness of that she needed, but then she was fearless and uncompromising and she was not afraid.
Yeah, and I would say that she did that. She believed in her own ability to pull it all off, but she also believed in the ability of everybody around her that she embraced to pull it off. Yeah. You know, she was a real booster.
I mean, she was in that classic description of a maven, of like one person leads to another, and as I said, people, you know, at LongHouse, Jonathan Gold came all the way from California with his family. I mean, and the other people that were there was. And you're kind of like, how the heck, like, how did this happen? Right. And everyone just always said yes.
And then those connections that she made, they rubber banded back. There's this whole spider web. So I think the mentoring, but also her connectivity and spider webbing us all together as writers with a sense of generosity, because, you know, in writing, there's not necessarily a sense of sharing, but Molly brought that.
Yeah. She wove people together, and I asked her, I said, what's going to happen here at LongHouse? And she said, I'm very curious about that myself. So, you know.
Yes. Yeah, and I guess I would just echo just this sense of her big heart. She, I mean, I met some of my best friends through her, because of her, with her, going to Alaska, going to Oregon, going to all these crazy places with her, but I always felt like her heart was so big.
And another story that I would tell was she was very generous, and she took her assistants to Le Cirque, and so this is my first time going to Le Cirque, and this was really at the pinnacle of it in the early 90s, and of course Molly, like all these things were coming to the table, and you know, and the person next to us said, who, and I was, you know, much younger, and we were, you know, and they're like, why are you getting all of this stuff? Like, what's going on? And instead of being like at that self-conscious moment, Molly turned around and she goes, I know, isn't it amazing? And she was like, she wasn't jaded. I mean, she obviously, you know, you can't be a writer in New York and all the things that she went through, but she still had that ability to say like, isn't that amazing? And you believed her.
Other side, greatest weakness.
Chaos.
Math.
Yeah. She wasn't the best at budgeting.
You can say a few more words about that.
I won't, but someone will.
She had big ideas, and sometimes big ideas don't, you know, have the details. She was not a detail person. Although, you know, writing a cookbook like that, I was just looking at this today, and like all the photographs and all the people and the exuberance, I mean, she had chutzpah.
I mean, I'll say this. She doesn't owe me money, but I'm not sure about anybody else in this room.
Right.
I wasn't going to bring that up. But who's got the checkbook?
10 years from now, how will she be remembered?
I think as one of the great food writers and possibly writers of our time, and really a visionary.
Yeah, I think she was a really amazing chronicle, as she says, of the human experience, and was able to take food writing to which is now, of course, you can't write about food without writing about class and identity, and that she didn't put a value on like, I'm only going to write about, you know, 4-star restaurants. She could write about 4-star restaurants, but she could, you know, talk about the people behind it so that you cared and it just wasn't elitist. And she told stories that you wanted to hear in ways you wanted to hear them. Like she wrote a lot of, when I was working with her, she was, struggling. She was always struggling with her weight or talking about it, and she had this vision of doing, all this healthful eating. And so we were developing a lot of content in that way. And then you would read the story that would go with it, and it was like whipped cream. It was like you could be, the exuberance wasn't taken out of it, and that was always that core and heart of where she was.
I would like to say that she was very politically aware, and when she did One Big Table, she knew the situation of the United States. She was very aware of the divisions in the United States, and that's her answer to it. We're all at one big table. Let's get together with the food. We can start there. And I think that was what she wanted to do, was to build all of these bridges all over the country and try to pull us together in some way. But she was deeply politically aware and socially aware.
I know that many of you had experiences with Molly that you want to talk about. And do
No,
we have...
Emily with the red shirt, the Festival of the New, will have the microphone. We ask you to please wait to get the mic so we can get you on the videotape. So, Emily?
I want to ask the first person, Aria, is that pronounced right? Samuelson, who was Molly O'Neill's stepdaughter.
Can I stand?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. I wrote something. Hi, everyone. A pen. I just feel like I should have a pen in my hand. Tonight, with my kitchen a mess, I have Molly on my mind. My Instant Pot is balancing atop the microwave to save counter space, and the fruit bowl is stashed under the dish rack. The banana is soaking wet. There are flakes of garlic peels mixed in with the uneven shards. I love to cook, but I still don't really know how to chop an onion, not so that it's diced into perfect tiny pieces. And tonight, 2 months after her passing, I have Molly on my mind and our story, which is messier than my kitchen ever could be. Molly was my stepmother. My parents had divorced when I was 6 months old, and Molly met my father a year later. So from my child's perspective, she was always there. The fact of 3 parents was as real as any other truth I was indoctrinated into. There was my mother, my father, and there was Molly. Of the 3, it was Molly who gave me my appetite for French onion soup and orchids made from buttercream frosting from the Cupcake Cafe, for the white chocolate fountain at Le Cirque, which seemed to me as a 5-year-old to be Willy Wonka's factory incarnate. It's because of Molly that I've always thought Hershey bars were disgusting. It was Molly who fed my appetite for language, for making things with an almost compulsive creativity. When I was 6 months old, Molly and I paper-mache'd mermaids. We tore newspaper into long strips, slimed hands with flour glue, pinched hair into ribbons of seaweed, squeezed nipples out of paste. Beyond the windows of her 10th floor Hell's Kitchen apartment, cars battled for turf. But art was a world all our own, and we could live there for hours, days. Molly sang Elton John to me. How wonderful life is now you're in the world. While my mother was working graveyard shifts at the hospital, Molly was the one who visited my 2nd grade class and instructed us to press lemons to our cheek, inhale their scent, squeeze a drop onto our tongues, and then write a poem. From Molly, I discovered the sour nectar of lemons and poetry, both of which I would forever crave. As a child, I wanted many things, but most of all, I wanted to be a Broadway star. All my life, I'd been regaling my family with show tunes privately, but it was Molly who orchestrated the opportunity for my first performance, which happened at the Community Theater in Rensselaerville, which is the place that people have been mentioning. I just want to say that was my home. So on the stage of the church where the auditions were happening, I felt myself conjure sound from a velvet place and felt the room explode. The only surprise was how easy it was, this voice, this power, as if it had been waiting for me. Molly may not have given me this talent, but she gave me my first stage. Molly gave me an appetite for complexity, for seeing how ideas connected to each other in a gorgeous web. Grandiosity is something you could bite into like the perfect peach and let the juices spill. She taught me to want to be the best. She was my first editor. I'd always loved stories, but Molly introduced me to the music of language, the concrete, the tender, how to deliver a punch. She wrote my best high school essay, the one the teacher framed on his refrigerator. They were my ideas, but they were her poetry, her music. Like most people probably, I don't think Molly dreamt of being a stepmother. She wanted her own child, and when this proved impossible, she wanted to be my only mother. But we both knew this was not to be. I adored my mother, clung to her body like a vine, and I lamented all the time I was taken away from her. When I mentioned my mother or missing her, or somebody mistook Molly for my mother and I corrected them, Molly's eyes seared like the flaming cherries of her cigarette ends as she stormed out of the room. From Molly, I learned when to raise my voice proudly and when to keep words tucked into the folds of my belly and let them turn into secrets. Of course, Molly had her secrets too, and something happened when I was 10 years old that poisoned our relationship seemingly forever. It turned vitriolic, and when she and my father divorced, it seemed like we were unlikely to see each other again. But when I was 14, Molly wooed her way back into my life and let me know that she wanted to stay a part of it. The couple of years that preceded were the closest we'd ever have, in part because of how Molly nourished my teenage appetite for travel and adventure, introducing me firsthand to how gorgeous and strange and enormous the world was. At 15, Molly took me caravanning through New Mexico, through landscapes that looked like the inside of my body. In New Mexico, we ate bread from outdoor clay stoves cooked by 3 generations of Pueblo women. We attended a Kabbalistic Seder where I saw my first ever joint, and the rabbi got stoned. Later that summer, we traveled to Alaska for 3 weeks. I was a city girl through and through, but Alaska changed me forever. Alaska who never turned dark, only lavender. Alaska who saw me through my first kiss, first love, and first heartbreak in the course of 3 days. Alaska where I wrote all about it in my journal in red pen. Alaska where I fell in love with another version of myself, of who I might become, when I had never considered. Strong, rugged, authentic, and free. And Molly was there for all of it, alternately encouraging me, chastising, depending on me, pulling away, bobbing up and down the Kenai Peninsula in the same yellow boat. 6 years ago, in 2014, we fell out of touch. It was over something silly, but neither of us would budge. Neither of us was willing to initiate. Both of us probably felt abandoned, angry, and afraid of how we'd be received. I say probably because I'll never exactly know. Molly's absence in my life, even before she died, helped me to see our relationship more clearly. And though I felt her absence profoundly, it also freed me to step into my voice as a writer and an artist. Every now and then I'd resolve that I was going to reach out to her, but very quickly those flames of urgency would dim. I just didn't know what I'd say or how to say it. It all just felt too complicated and too scary. I never really imagined that our relationship could be left so unresolved, that we would never have a chance to talk it all through and make amends of a sort. I thought we had more time. I loved Molly. I admired her. I was kind of terrified of her, and she really hurt me. And all of these are true. I don't have anything really eloquent to say about this grief except that it's continually unfolding. And one of the things that's come up in the last couple of months in these different memorial events is really seeing that she had such a talent for creating community. I think even better than creating deep, kind of sustaining, intimate friendships, she was really amazing at amassing a village. The last thing I'll say is this. I'd always seen the prospect of reconnecting with Molly as something so complicated. I was convinced that too much had changed in my life, but still not enough to turn me into an adult capable of speaking my truth with grace and power. I was convinced that Before I reached out, I would need to know exactly what to say based on a prediction of what she might say and what I would say to that, and so on. I was convinced I had to know how the game would play out before it even started. Now I realize maybe it could have actually been really simple. Maybe all I needed to do was call her up and ask her to teach me how to chop an onion. Thank you.
Other comments or questions for the panelists?
I just have to say it. Hi, I'm Dee Dee Ray, and this famous farm where LongHouse was my farm. And no one, I don't know how to really put it, but I thought it was just going to be a few weeks, one summer. So did my husband. So did everybody. And what happened was an avalanche of creativity, as everybody's already said. And I've known Molly for a very long time. And I, along with Mame and Mary here, we took care of her for the last 3 years of her life when she was suffering. And it was our choice, and we are so grateful to have had the opportunity. And I will never forget LongHouse. We used to sit in our upstairs and look out the window, and all these people were marching by. And every once in a while, I'd wander into the barn for dinner, because there it was, everybody. And they just kept growing and growing and growing and growing, and we couldn't say no. So I am one of the people that could never say no to Molly. And the memory of it is very dear to me. And Molly's memory, and one of my greatest memories, I have 2 daughters. And one Christmas, Molly used to make dinner for the whole town. She'd make a cassoulet and all these cookies. I can't bake, but one Christmas I found myself in there baking with Aria, my 2 daughters, and singing to Mamma Mia. We regaled again and again, Starship Trooper, as we were rolling impossibly complicated cookies, which I will never in my life be able to make again. And it is a memory that I will hold dear. Thank you.
Other comments? In the back.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Bucell, and I worked with Molly on One Big Table. So I was there with Frank Reese out in Kansas doing the crazy turkey thing as we did the heritage turkeys. And Molly and I traveled all over the South together, many trips. Memorable trips. And at her memorial, what I really wanted to emphasize, and what I'd like to say again tonight, is that Molly's range was so huge. You know, what we loved about these Southern trips were the vernacular artists that we went to, and Thornton Dial, Lonnie Holly. We went down to Gee's Bend and spent the night with the quilters. And we'd sort of remember at the end, oh yeah, they're the recipes. We've got to get the recipes. But meanwhile, we were just having an extraordinary experience. And that's what it was like with Molly. I came into it blindly. I had a dinner party for my beloved friend Honor Moore. Honor invited her. I thought, damn, Molly O'Neill's coming to my house. What am I going to cook? You know, that kind of thing. She came. There was a snowstorm. She stayed for 3 nights. And at the end of it, I was working for her. So, you know, that's our communal experience with her, of being drawn into something that we never dreamed of. And then despite all the complications, and there were many, we've heard the words chaos, I'll attest to that, disorganization, a freedom, though, that was so extraordinary. We'd go to the South, let me give you an example, and we'd have a rented car, and the first thing she wanted to do was to go to Starbucks, and she wanted to get 8 iced coffees, which she would put in the back of the car. And she said that these coffees were made, that the creams and stuff weren't for real, so we never needed to worry about it. But that they would just be there for us as we traveled day after day. You know, it was completely nuts, and it was just marvelous. The product, which was so hard fought, one big table wasn't an easy accomplishment. Not only was it enormous, she went through editors, she went through publishers, she didn't get the kind of support, in case anybody from the publishing world is here, that she needed at the end. I think it was 2 weeks of publicity. But man, did we ever have a great opening at Ellis Island, one of the huge events, you know, with a choir up in the wonderful top of it, singing "America the Beautiful," and food trucks all around, and you know, it was just perfect. It was wonderful. So, like all of us, her life was imperfect, and it was way too short, but it was wonderful, it was magnificent, and honoring her here tonight is the perfect thing to do.
Another comment down here.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Fass, and I was Molly's copy editor on One Big Table. And Rebecca getting up gave me the courage to get up. Chaos you can't imagine. It's a copy editor's job to get the spelling right, get the punctuation right, fix the grammar. None of that really mattered because it was such incredible stories. It was wonderful and scary to work on. And as a copy editor, normally I'm working for the publisher. Molly had me working for her. As people say, you know, she drew you in. The first and only time in my life that I went to an editorial meeting was because Molly said, please, you have to come, you have to be there because you're on my side. That was towards the end of One Big Table, and I've never forgotten how wonderful she was. So.
Over here.
Here.
Hello.
I did not know Molly, but I'm really curious. She seems like a hurricane or all-consuming and bigger than, I don't even want to say life, but how many of you are up there, you give the impression of being very strong women. How did she deal with strong women, or strong people, I should say?
That's what she wanted.
You had to be in that world. I think like if you couldn't get into that stream without being also part of that. And she could tell. I mean, she had an affinity for people, and she did have a really good way of sizing somebody up and knowing whether that like they were going to be someone that would get it to a certain extent. As everyone is thinking about it, this image of her is, you know, Barnum and Bailey, Three-Ring Circus. Like she was that conductor to bring it all together. But it was never, I mean, yes, sometimes it was unbalanced, but there was always places for you to show up. Mm-hmm. as well.
Yeah, she wasn't controlling.
Not at all.
You know, that just, you know, she was really, she'd be like, oh, you're my collaborator now. Well, yeah, go ahead. Like, build the pyramid. Go for it. Cool. Like, she really wanted, you know, she wanted you to take like a piece of she wanted you to do your own project. And she wanted you to just dream up the piece of her project that you were going to do too, you know? So, you know, she liked self-starters, you know?
Mm-hmm. She also had this way of, in all her bigness, she would speak very quietly sometimes, you know? Her voice would get very quiet, but she would look you in the eye and you felt so acknowledged, and the softness in her voice made room for you. So it was about strength, but there was room. She wasn't one of these people who was like, me, me, me. Yeah. I mean, she liked to talk about herself, but she wanted to hear your story, and she often would get very soft. I remember the first time she did that with me, I was really thrown off. Why is she being so quiet? Something must be wrong. But it wasn't, because she was listening.
And there was, I mean, you can see it when I was watching it reminded me of, there was an impishness to her, you know, and she kind of knew she was getting away with shit. Yeah. And she really enjoyed that, you know, and that the more people that she could create kind of that sort of energy that everyone would be part of and sort of float above. I mean, and she was, in some ways, you know, something would go wrong. Some of us would, you know, go, oh my God, screwed up. And she'd be like, yeah, go on, right on to the next thing. And that was a real lesson.
The other Molly.
I think many of you in this room knew Molly more personally than I did, but none of you have my story because I am also Molly O'Neill. And from the time I was a child, she was sort of this mythical creature to me because my grandfather would send me her clippings with little notes in the margin. He lived in New Jersey, I grew up in Texas. Little notes in the margin. Dear Molly, sounds like a good dinner. Why didn't you invite us? Dear Molly, why were you so mean to them? So I knew about Molly almost before I knew about myself. I moved to New York 20 years ago. I work in book publishing, and Molly's cookbook introduced me to New York. As I got going in publishing, we crossed paths constantly because her publisher and my publisher were related. People would call trying to reach her, and the operator would patch them through to me. I would get her review copies. I'm pretty sure I was the recipient of a lovely note from you once upon a time. I would get invitations to gala dinners that, you know, as an assistant in publishing, I couldn't dream of attending. $1,000 a head gala dinners. So somewhere along the line, another writer who had also worked at the Times and who published at HarperCollins said to me, do you know about the other Molly? And I said, she's been following me my whole life, or I've been following her life my whole life. And so he put us in touch. And I got an email one day that said, Dear Molly O'Neill, Bob Lipsyte said we should be in touch. There's quite a few of us, we should start a club. And I wrote back to her and sort of tried to hold on to some of my fangirlishness, but basically said, you know, you've been this huge person in my life, my whole life, even though we've never met. I can't promise that I won't one of these days give an interview as you. And she wrote back instantly and said, we need all the ink we can get. You have my blessing. And from there, we really became friends because I had a lot of mail to forward to her. Every time she spoke at an event, I got her social media followers because I had the better SEO. And so I'm friends probably with some of you on Twitter because I would always explain, I'm not the Molly O'Neill you're looking for, but I like food and I like stories and you seem interesting, let's be friends. And so Molly gifted me her community. I went up to the LongHouse that was focused on Chinese food, and actually I was pulling it up in my notes as people were talking because I basically invited myself. I had been tagged in so many pictures. Someone had a pig roast once upon a time, and I got tagged in photos as her, and I was like, I gotta get to one of these parties. So I invited myself, and then I had a moment of sheepishness and thought, do I belong here? This is a food event. I work in children's publishing. And so I wrote back to her, and I said, are you sure it's okay if I come? And she wrote back and said, are you kidding? I can't wait for you to come. It's about telling stories, and that's where the juice comes, from the intersection. Spread the word and bring friends, but only smart, fun ones, okay? I could go on, but we are the smart, fun ones.
Additional comments?
Hi, I'm Katie Bomber-Schwab. I don't want to play back to you. I was an actor and playwright for my first 10 years in New York, and 10 years ago, last week, finished culinary school and did a big life change, and found LongHouse, the first one. I went to 3 of them, and I went up to Rensselaerville and thought, this is my first food event in my new industry. And I walked in, and Molly started off by saying, hi, you're all here because you're all in an industry that's dead as we know it. And I thought, oh God. But what she did was she really created this community and this training ground, and was so committed to fostering young writers and fostering a young food writing community, and I am so grateful for that. I feel like I went to the University of Molly O'Neill, and it's how I know Betsy. But I just want to share, I found last week a screenshot of a Facebook post that she had done last June, and it just in everything, she was so observant and so eloquent, and it was about a drive and a meal with her mom. So it was June 23rd last year. Driving from Rensselaerville back to the city, my mother and I were hungry for dinner. I also wanted to taste the day we'd spent laughing and talking like a house on fire, finally after all these years. And there it was, at Gaskin's in Germantown, 3 sorts of different radishes in, grainy mustard vinaigrette with shaved celery, some microgreens and cheddar shavings, 6 decades of our dynamic, sharp, peppery, bitter, buttery, and sweet, reconciled and elevated to art in a salad bowl. It hit us both at first crunch. I make the salad again and again to remember the stab in my heart as I watched her studying the menu, my mother, eager and starry-eyed as a 9-year-old when she was 90 and visiting from Ohio. I can't get enough of tasting the moment when I loved her so much it hurt. That's all, thanks.
I want to thank the panel. The panel has been fantastic. And I want to thank those that made comments. I think if Molly had been here, she would have been smiling.
She was here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.